Good morning to you. This is the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Bob Pacello along with Hans Heiser. Texas Pete, drama for your mouth. Week 10 of the college football season is in the books, and the drama at the top of the SEC, Hans, is almost over. Georgia and Alabama are that much closer to an SEC title game. Georgia clinches yesterday. Alabama is just a win over Auburn away from clinching, although if Auburn loses to Georgia next week,
right,
that's going to pretty much lock it up.
Auburn's going to have obviously a major influence on where this thing goes. They'll host Georgia next week. That game, by the way, has been flexed to 3:30. It is going to be the CBS 3:30 game next week. You have to expect that tickets are going to be hard to come by. I think Georgia's 9-2 in their last 11 overall against Auburn, but a lot of people expect Auburn to be favored in this game, and let's not discount. You said the SEC championship, Bob, is pretty much close to being set. Yeah, Georgia gets in with Ole Miss's win at Kentucky yesterday, and they clinched the East, but Auburn, they still control their own destiny. They beat Georgia next week, and then, of course, the Iron Bowl, they find a way to win that. They're in the Georgia Dome, so Auburn not a thing either. No,
so if Auburn beats Georgia, and then they beat Alabama, and then they knock off Notre Dame, and then they beat Clemson, they're the national champs.
Well, here's the thing for Georgia, though. You know, when you're looking at it nationally speaking, Georgia, what it comes down to, you can lose this Auburn game and still find a way to get in the playoff. At the end of the day, you have to beat Alabama one way or the other. But with Penn State losing yesterday, with Ohio State losing yesterday, with Oklahoma State losing yesterday, you have a bunch of two-loss teams now, and Auburn's in that mix as well. Georgia doesn't want to be in that conversation at the end of the year. That's why this Auburn win is important. You know, you don't want to be in a situation where if you lose that Alabama game, you know, your season's over. So now all of a sudden, the loss against Auburn, you find a way to get back into it.
Well, we take you around college football and you talk about the upsets, and all of these continue to help the SEC. As each week goes by, Hans, the odds of the SEC getting two teams into the college football playoff goes up. The Ohio State loss helps. The Penn State loss helps. The Oklahoma State loss helps. If Georgia and Alabama go into the SEC championship game unbeaten, I'm going to tell you this right now, the conference will get two teams in. The new rankings will be released on Tuesday.
That's assuming Georgia beats Auburn, right, if they were both undefeated. Right.
Yes, that's what I said.
I understand that. I have to hold you accountable.
When the rankings come out Tuesday, Oklahoma's still going to be number 5, by the way. Georgia's going to be 1. Alabama's going to be 2, Notre Dame's going to be 3, and Clemson is going to be 4. There's going to be no change at the top, and that all bodes well for the SEC.
Yeah, it does bode well for the SEC, but now all of a sudden, if you're a Pac-12 school, if you're the University of Washington, if you're a Big 12 school, of course, TCU plays Oklahoma next week. The winner of that game is going to have a legitimate argument as to why they should be in this championship playoff. In the ACC, everybody wants to continue to discount Miami. Well, guess what? Coach Mark Richt won his 13th game in a row last night. They're undefeated. The aforementioned Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Catholics versus convicts, they're doing that thing again next week. This thing's going to get just more and more interesting as the season evolves. It's going to be a lot of fun.
We want your comments, and they're rolling in already. Diane Pratt says, go Dawgs. Linda Weiler says, you wished waiter. They're going so fast I can't even read them. But we want your comments as they come in. Let's get to the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Texas Pete is drama for your mouth. Georgia knocks off South Carolina 24-10 yesterday in Athens as the Dawgs clinch the SEC East. They will be in the SEC championship game for the first time since 2012. Hans 9-0 for the first time since 1982, and a guy by the name of Herschel was toting the football. You know, I was speaking with a lot of Georgia football fans last night, and they wanted to talk about how this was an ugly win. And I'm not so sure it was an ugly win. I don't see it that way. I thought one of the prettiest things in this football game was the drive to start the fourth quarter, where they only come away with a field goal, but they take the clock from 15 minutes down to 6.5. Just a thing of beauty.
Yeah, Bob, looking at this game and watching South Carolina play this year, that's how they have to play. You know, the injury to Deebo Samuel, the injury to their starting tailback, they are very limited on offense, what they can do, especially big play down the field. So in order for Georgia to win this game, it wasn't going to be pretty. You had to win the time of possession. You had to win the turnover battle. They did both of those, and Georgia escapes with a 24-10 victory. That's how South Carolina wants you to play. But, Bob, here's all you need to know about Georgia and the confidence that Kirby Smart has in this this defense. They start the game off with a surprise onside kick by saying, "Here you go, Will. You know, if we don't get it, we get the ball to start the second half, and you got to go 50 yards on us." They missed the field goal. You know, Georgia goes the length of the field. Godwin turns the ball over there inside the 5. Those are the kind of plays that will cost Georgia a football game against Auburn next week. You can't make those kind of mistakes, turnovers inside the 5-yard line against a good football team like Auburn, but they get the win. Ton of credit to Will Muschamp's team, the job that he's done with this team this year, but Georgia 9-0, man.
I want to spend a little time talking about this Georgia running game, which gets the job done yesterday. Nick Chubb goes over 100 yards, 102 to be exact. Sony Michel with 81, and that TD run was a thing of beauty where he bounces it to the outside and just outraces the defense. Obviously, Georgia's going to have to run the football like this to get it done at Auburn.
Oh, there's no question about it. And it's going to be probably the best defense that they faced all year. Now, granted, they're a much different team than they were when they went into South Bend earlier in the season. But, you know, Auburn, to me, is the best 2-loss team in the country. I think you saw yesterday, and we'll break this game down a little bit more. Jarrett Stidham, 3 touchdown passes again yesterday. You know about Kerryon Johnson, his ability. Caught a ball yesterday for a touchdown. Offensively, they're really going to challenge the Georgia Bulldogs as far as their multi-dimensional being able to run it, being able to throw it. But you saw yesterday with Jake Fromm, Georgia offensively having to throw the ball over 20 times. I thought Jake Fromm made some great throws, especially in the red zone. He just continues to get better week by week.
That supposedly is the one weakness of this team, or the area of the team we don't know enough about, is the quarterback spot and Jake Fromm's ability to throw when he needs to throw. Numbers yesterday, 16 of 22, 196, a couple of touchdowns. The touchdown catch from Wims was just an incredible catch. I don't know how he kept his feet in bounds.
You know, one thing I went to the Georgia game yesterday. It was the first time, and they show the replays now on the Jumbotron. They have for quite some time, but even with more detail. And when that play happened in live action, you're saying there's no way that that's a touchdown. They showed it over and over and over again. Obviously, the fans got engaged and put a lot of pressure on the officials to make the right call. It was interesting, whereas 5 years ago, that was non-existent.
Right.
You know, you weren't able to see that at the game. That was a pretty cool experience. Great pass and catch by those two. They continue to have great chemistry.
If I'm a Georgia fan, I feel a lot better about Jake Fromm's ability to take the game, put it on his back, and lead Georgia. I just feel better about it after watching a pretty good South Carolina defense.
Yeah.
Unable to stop them when they needed to.
And the offensive line all season long continues to be the unsought hero for the Georgia Bulldogs. 5 carries, or 5 different guys yesterday with carries for the Georgia football team. And only 1 sack on Jake Fromm. One thing you got to do for a freshman they weren't able to do last year with Jacob Eason is protect him, give him time to throw. Well, this year, this offensive line has done a fantastic job protecting him. They continued to do so yesterday, opened up huge holes in the running game, and when they needed it most on that final drive, Bob, able to utilize the clock and work it down and just basically get rid of South Carolina.
You know, in defeat, a nice effort by South Carolina.
No doubt.
Dawgs go down. They fall to 6-3, but I mean, they really played hard. Will Muschamp's team did from start to finish. Didn't make many mistakes. They made Georgia win the football game as opposed to losing it. And all credit goes to Jake Bentley. He's just a nice quarterback.
Yeah, you watch him. He's got command of that team. I mean, he's without doubt the leader. But the only two turnovers that South Carolina had in the game were both plays at the end of the half where they had to make a play. You know, where they were uncomfortable. They needed to go down the field 15, 20 yards. And without Samuel, they just don't have that ability. So, and this is a team that's going to have to grind it out, make the other team make turnovers. And credit to Georgia, they didn't fall into their trap. And it was funny to watch Kirby and Will Muschamp go back and forth yesterday. And it started with the surprise onside kick. Yep. You know, you could just tell that there was tremendous respect for one another, their gamemanship, their game plans, what was going into it. And it's like, okay, Will, you want to play like this? Well, this is what I'm going to do. And, 2 young coaches in the SEC, you think that these guys are going to be around and what's going to be a continued rivalry for years to come.
All right, we do want to get some of your thoughts. Sean McKinney, if anyone thinks Georgia will beat Bama, they're crazy. And Stacy Moreland says, we already knew Jake is for real. I didn't know that. Well, I had an inkling, but it was nice to see it, proof in the pudding. But your thoughts?
Well, I tell you what, we'll talk about it a little bit more. We break down Alabama LSU in just a second. Alabama lost 2 starting linebackers for the season yesterday, and to say that that won't matter, they averaged, I think, 67 yards a game on defense. They allow rushing. LSU ran for 155 yesterday. Now, I know LSU, they have an unconventional offense. They like to use some different formations to run the football, but that's going to be a tremendous challenge for Alabama next week going on the road to Starkville, taking on a Mississippi State team that obviously relies on that running game and some of those pass option plays. So Alabama's going to have to make some adjustments on the fly for what's a tough end of their schedule.
All right, let's go back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Texas Pete, drama for your mouth. You mentioned Alabama, LSU. The Tide get it done in workmanlike fashion. 24-10 is the final count. Tide jump out to the 14-0 lead and then just leave it up to the defense. Sensational again. Alabama has now run its winning streak over LSU to 7 straight games. Yeah, the
Ronnie Harrison interception early on set the tone in this one. Danny Etling, I don't know if he got concussed or something happened to him where he got banged up on that final drive. Bannon came in, looked okay, but the story of this one was Alabama's defense. You know, they jumped on him early with the big drive, scored a touchdown, 7-0. You get the interception, you come back in, you make it 14-0. That turned out to be the difference in the game and the only turnover in the game. That just goes to show you when you play Alabama, you have to play a perfect game. And I thought Etling played well. There was a couple plays way downfield that could have been difference makers in this game.
Could have made it one that
right. You had Shark drop the ball, but there were a couple big missed opportunities for LSU yesterday. But I think Alabama, the story in this game is the 2 linebackers getting hurt. I mean, that's going to be a tough adjustment. Now, luckily for them, they are Alabama, so they have some guys behind them that have some playing experience on special teams and whatnot. But that's going to be tough going on the road next week to Mississippi State. You know, they finish up with Auburn, and hopefully for them an SEC title game.
Yeah, Evans had 10 tackles and a sack. Davis had 9 tackles and a sack. As a team, they had 6 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. And for an LSU team that has to play ahead of the chains, that's just tough to overcome. But Hans, credit due to LSU. I was impressed by this team. They're down 14-0. They could have folded. This team fought hard the entire way. Derek Williams had that nice run. He and Geis ended up with 154 yards combined against an Alabama defense where you don't do that very often.
No. They it's amazing what they've done to turn this season around. You know, the loss to Troy State, the embarrassing loss to Mississippi State. Turns out they're pretty good, by the way. But Coach O, you know, ever since they had that closed door meetings, whatever went on there, they've gotten a different effort from their football team. Now, granted, they've gotten healthy. You know, I think Geis being healthy's helped them out a lot. The familiarity with the offense. They've got a lot of young guys that are playing on both sides of the ball. Here's the thing with this offense, and you and I talked about it early on in the season with Matt Canada's deal. It's so unconventional. It can be a tough watch when it's not working. But, yeah, I think you see now the progression as the season's gone along with what they're trying to do. They ever get a quarterback down there with the athletes they have at the playmaking position and, you know, the guys they're going to be able to have on defense year in and year out, you better watch out. I mean, they're going to put up some big numbers if he can ever get a consistent quarterback there.
Okay, so Alabama gets a win over a top 25 team. The question becomes, does the Tide deserve to be #1 when the new collegiate football rankings are released on Tuesday? Does Alabama leapfrog Georgia?
I don't think so. I think that the committee last week, they've committed to Georgia being #1. I can't see too many guys flip-flopping at this point. There wasn't anything out of that game that you saw from Alabama last night that was, that blew your socks off. That this is without a doubt the #1 team in the country. And to me, on the eye test, I think they are the best team that I've seen this year. But if you're telling me the committee thought last week Georgia was #1, I don't see how you can flip-flop at this point. And here you go, coming up next week, 2 really big road tests for both of these clubs. Alabama, we talked about the injuries, on the road, taking on Starkville, Mississippi State and Starkville, and then Georgia, of course, on the road in Auburn. 2 huge games for both of those teams next week.
Well, the thing that's going to keep Georgia ahead is the win over Notre Dame, which won again yesterday impressively. Right. As long as they have that win over the #3 team, they stay ahead of Alabama. And I still feel, Hans, deep down that Georgia being #1 and Alabama being #2 is better for the conference.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And it's we talked about these 2 games, and Georgia's in a position where if they win this game, if they lose to Auburn and they do what they're supposed to do in their final 2 games, home game against Kentucky and then at Georgia Tech, if they win those 2 and their only blemish on their schedule is a loss against Auburn, Bob, they're still in a situation where if they beat Alabama in the SEC title game, they're going to be in the playoff.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
So they're in a good situation. I really do think, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the show. I think that's going to be, without question, their toughest challenge next week. I think Auburn offensively is clicking on all cylinders. You saw Stidham make some great throws yesterday. Georgia Fromm's going to have to make some plays. And yeah, he hasn't shown anything that he can't do that, but the bottom line is he's going to be on the road in the SEC in a brutal environment. He's going to have to make some big plays on Saturday.
Well, the comments keep rolling in. James J. Harn, Alabama had one good win, and they got beat by Troy. Their one good win, they're saying, is over LSU, and then LSU got beat by Troy. And I agree, it doesn't compare to Georgia beating Notre Dame and even beating a very good South Carolina team and beating Mississippi State to a pulp. We're going to find out what Alabama can do with Mississippi State, but Georgia's number one right now. Alabama might be, I'm not saying Georgia's the better team, but Georgia deserves to be number one, and I think that's good for the conference.
Yeah, I don't know how you change it at this point. And there's some other messages coming on our Facebook Live thing saying LSU's a way better team than South Carolina. It doesn't matter at this point. You understand, the committee has already said last week, in their opinion, Georgia to this point is the number one team in the country. What did you see yesterday that would indicate that they are going to make a change? They're not going to. I will ask this: Alabama's offense, the passing game, does that leave a little bit to be desired if you're Nick Saban?
I think a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too.
Good luck finding a team that can control the run game and keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket.
Right.
I don't know if that team exists, because if you can't keep him in the pocket, his legs are just as good as throwing, and it doesn't matter. All right, let's go back to the big board. Texas Pete Scoreboard, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Auburn goes on the road into College Station, knocks off Texas A&M 42-27. Big effort in this game by Jarrett Stidham. Returns to his home state. Former Baylor transfer goes 20 of 27, 268, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Auburn now 7-2 and still just the one loss in the conference.
Yeah, you know, this game was close early on. I mean, A&M was in this game early. It was 13-7 with about a minute and a half left to play. And all the Stidham hits Darius Slayton for that huge touchdown with about a minute and 15 seconds left. They hold A&M to 3 and out. They block the punt. They take it in for a touchdown. It's 21-13. They get the ball at half. They go right down the field. They score again. The game's over. So, A&M was in this game early, but credit to Auburn's special teams yesterday, making a crucial play going in the locker room, and that momentum carried over in the second half, and the rest is history.
All right, we're going to get back to the Tigers in just a second, but I want to ask you about Kevin Sumlin and how hot his seat is. Prior to the start of the season, their athletic director, Scott Woodward, said that Sumlin needed to win this year. He'd won 8 games the past 3 years. So to me, that means at least 9 games, probably 10. They're now 5-4, and they're likely to finish at 7-5.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's 7-5. Are you counting a win over LSU?
No, I'm not counting a win over LSU.
I think that's the game. I think he's got to win that game
but that still only gets you 8 wins.
Right.
Is that good enough? Does that cut it?
Well, to answer your question, no. If he got put on, notice at the beginning of the season by the athletic director, which he did. But here's the thing, that I see with Texas A&M is I see a desperate Kevin Sumlin. You watched the press conference yesterday, and his comments and his tone, it was as if he was making excuses and preaching to his fan base that, hey, why we haven't played the kind of football that I feel we're capable of, consistency being the word that he kept bringing up, is we're young on both sides of the ball. We're making mistakes that young players make. A lot of stuff like that, using injuries and stuff like that. And all of this is true. But Bob, when you see coaches, you see athletes talking like that, making excuses, it's almost as if to say, yeah, I know I'm not doing the job that you expect me to do, but this is why I'm not doing my job, and that's never a good sign.
Well, Auburn now looks ahead to the Georgia game. Are the Tigers ready? I think their run game and their offense appear to be rounding into midseason form. Kerryon Johnson was a man yesterday, 29 carries, 145 yards. One of his runs, I can't think of the defensive player for Texas A&M, number 4. I mean, he just shoved him get out of there, son, and picked up an extra 10 yards. It was a thing of beauty. I think this Tigers team, I'm not going to say they're going to win the game, but I think it's all set up to be a very good game because Auburn is playing its best football.
Yeah, Kerryon Johnson, whoever gets him in the NFL is going to be getting a 40-year-old running back. This guy's getting 35, 40 carries. It's unbelievable how much they rely on him. So, if you're Georgia, you key on him, you make Stidham make some plays in the passing game. I don't know. But Malzahn, this is the game for him. I honestly believe, that's great. You beat Texas A&M on the road yesterday. It's a game you're supposed to win. They were favored by 15 points in this game. You handle your business. But here's the problem with the Gus Bus. You can't beat LSU, you can't beat Alabama, and you can't beat Georgia. And for that reason, that's why he's on the hot seat. And until he starts beating some of these teams, he's already lost to LSU this year, and he's got Georgia and Alabama ahead of him. If he loses one of these two games, if he loses either Georgia or Alabama, I honestly think they make a change at head coach.
They're 7-2 right now.
I understand that, but you can't beat those teams. It's not going to be good enough.
All right, say you got Louisiana Monroe in the middle of those two games. Say things play out as they should, and Auburn goes 8-4, but they play very well in those two games. Gus Malzahn, you're going to fire him? 8-4?
Not me. I don't fire him. I'm just telling you what the
Auburn.
They've had it. They do not want to lose to Alabama every year. They do not want to lose to Georgia every year. They do not want it to be a fait accompli when they go to Baton Rouge. They're not going to win the football game, and that's where Auburn's at right now. Listen, I'm all about the Gus Bus. I think he's a heck of a football coach, man, but they've had it.
John C. Allen agrees with you, obviously an Auburn fan. I think you are, John. I apologize if you're not. Auburn lost to the good teams they played. And to your point, that's hard to argue, but at the same time, be careful what you wish for. You fire a coach that wins 8, 9, 10 games every year, and then you try to replace him.
Oh, sure, right.
And it's not very easy. Look at LSU right now. I mean, they're bouncing back, but it's not easy replacing a guy that has systems in place and is able to recruit to a certain level. Getting from here to there may only be that far, but man, it's a long way.
Yeah, especially when you've had the success that Coach Malzahn has had. It's a difficult decision to make, but hey, they still got opportunities. They beat Georgia, they beat Alabama. It's a whole different conversation. But the one thing about Malzahn, you go back to the title game where they blew that big lead, the LSU game, special teams. We talked about him, making that play go in the locker room yesterday. They kicked the ball right to Chark. He takes it back for a touchdown. That's why you lose that game in Baton Rouge. So these are coaching mistakes that are costing his team game. I don't know that, person to person, that Georgia's that much more talented than Auburn is. But I really do look at the X's and O's. I look at Kirby's familiarity with Auburn, being all those years defensive coordinator at Alabama. And I look at Malzahn's inability to make adjustments in football games that, even though Auburn's favored in this, if it's close going into the second half, I wouldn't be surprised to see Georgia pull away.
All right, we're going to find out just how good this Auburn team is next week. I really think they're playing their best football in that they ran for 228 yards yesterday, 496 as a team. Held A&M to just 6 of 18 on third down. Special teams are good. They blocked a punt, and they're a relatively healthy team. I'm not going to argue that point. Okay.
No, definitely not going to argue that point.
Okay. Let's move on to the big board. Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Ole Miss knocks off Kentucky, 37-34. Rebels get it done on the road. Jordan Tamu, final seconds, throws that touchdown pass to DK Metcalf. Amazing grab. And this is after Kentucky takes the lead with just over 2 minutes to play. This was a huge victory in my estimation for Ole Miss, and just a tremendous loss for Kentucky, who's in position to really get themselves in a great bowl position, and man, to lose this one at home.
That's the second home loss this year that they've had in the final seconds. You go back to that Florida game, of course, what could have been. Steven Johnson, this guy, he takes them on a almost 7-minute drive, to give them the lead at the end of the game in the fourth quarter. But the problem was he left 2 minutes left on the clock for Tamu. And this guy making plays with his feet. You talked about the throw to Metcalf, the fade route. I hate the fade route, but it ended up working in their favor yesterday. And, of course, Georgia, by default, wins the SEC East because of this. But I think when you look at Ole Miss in this game, nice win. You think you like to have that one against Arkansas back the week before. But if Ole Miss can somehow just keep everything together the rest of this year. And you go into next year and you got Patterson and you got this Tamu guy at quarterback. That's a good problem to have, assuming that Patterson doesn't transfer. But you got these two guys at quarterback next year. All of a sudden, you get some playmakers to come in there, and maybe this thing gets turned around a little quicker than later for Ole Miss.
Tamu's been amazing. Ole Miss could get to that 6-win mark if they beat Illinois and then Texas A&M. Meantime, Kentucky. Man, 7-2 would look awfully good, still with a shot to win in the East. Instead, this loss takes them right out of the hunt. And you look at the rest of the schedule. Okay, they're 6-3. Mm-hmm. They got to go to Vandy next week. Vandy's coming off a win. It's not going to be easy winning on the road.
It's also not like going to Alabama or Notre Dame.
No, it's not. You play Georgia, at Georgia,
right,
and then you're back home to Louisville. I could see this Kentucky team losing all 3 games and finishing the regular season on a 4-game losing streak.
Yeah, defensively, they got a lot of questions to answer right now. Offensively, they've been rolling. Steven Johnson, Benny Smell, that run game, they've been going up and down the field. But defensively, they just can't get stops when games matter. You got to think Georgia, they are going to have their way running the football against them. And, what could have been for Kentucky football this year?
All right, let's take you back to the big board. Texas Pete Scoreboard, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. A little bit of a shocker in this final score, although maybe the result was not all that shocking. Missouri just hands it to Florida, 45-16. Randy Shannon's first game since replacing Jim McElwain. If you're a Florida fan, this is about as low as it gets because I think your team kind of quit.
No question. No question. I mean, you take a look at these games that they lost this year. They grinded out for Coach McElwain. The couple of points, the Texas A&M loss right at the end, the Tennessee loss right there at the end. It's obviously taking its toll on these kids.
I want to talk about this Missouri offense because they're just rolling up points. They've scored 68, 52, and now 45 points in the last 3 weeks. And Drew Lock, Locktober is what they were saying. We're into the month of November. Yeah,
are you saying that or they're saying that?
They're saying that. Okay. In Mizzou, they're going crazy over this kid. No, Lock goes 15 of 22, 28. 3 touchdowns. All of a sudden, this team, Hans, has won 3 straight games, now 4-5, and let me tell you about the rest of their schedule. Tennessee, at home, 5-5, right? Well, at Vandy, winnable game, maybe 6-5. At Arkansas, all of a sudden, they got a shot to finish 7-5. I know they're not going to win all these 3 games. They're not.
My question is to you: if they find a way to win these 3 games, and you're talking about a
Barry
6-game
back.
Right. How do you fire a guy that wins his last 6 games, that rounded the troops and got the dub, especially beating teams like Tennessee and Florida? I mean, come on. And not to mention, you got Locke coming back for his senior year next year. Offensively, look, you see what they can do. In order for them to be legitimate team in the East next year, at least a threat to anybody, they have got to address this defense. But that was a nice start yesterday back in the SEC schedule. Tennessee, Missouri next week. That should be a fun one. An opportunity for Barry Odom to get his 4th win in a row and for Drew Lock to continue to put up these circus numbers.
Look at Florida. Malik Zaire made the start. Not very impressive. Gators now 3-5 at South Carolina. UAB at FSU. We could easily see them. I shouldn't speak for you. I should never speak for you.
You have no idea what I'm going to say.
No,
what my thoughts are.
They could easily finish the season by losing these last 3 games and going 3-8.
Yeah, he's done a nice job. And I think all those games that you mentioned, I think that Missouri's going to be favored in. They got a lot of momentum going for you. The fact the quarterback's coming back, who knows with Missouri next year.
All right. Back to the big board, the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Mississippi State gets it done. A lot closer game than many of us thought.
Maybe looking ahead to Alabama.
Exactly what I was going to say. Come on, this is a classic look-ahead game. 34-23, the final count. 8 minutes to play. It's a 4-point game against a 2-7 team. I mean, how does that happen? Dan Mullen, though, has to be ecstatic to just escape with the victory at this point in time.
Yeah, it was closer than that. I mean, this was a 1-possession score midway through the through the third quarter, and credit their running game. Fitzgerald, he made some plays down the stretch again, and they walk away with the win. That all that matters. You have to expect with all those teams that lost in front of them. They're going to move up a little bit in the polls, so you're going to have a heck of an atmosphere next week in Stark Vegas, man. They got the bells going, Alabama coming to town a little bit banged up. That is going to be a close football game. I honestly believe that. The injuries, I'm just saying that's a tough, tough place to go and play at nighttime.
They got the win against UMass. Does this game, the way it was played out, does it matter at all? Because clearly they're looking ahead to Alabama. I mean,
how do you
if
not?
You're a Mississippi State fan, you're obviously a little concerned with the way they played. If your head coach, Dan Mullen, I think I'm saying to myself, this is perfect. Now I can get on my team all week long.
I agree. And especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, to give up 23 points yesterday to a UMass team that I think it's averaged about 15, 16 points a game, somewhere in there. Mississippi State came in with the number 12 overall defense in the country. So I wonder if they were laying in the weeds a little bit. I wonder if Todd Grantham was trying to just keep things a little bit vanilla for what's going to be the biggest test of the season next week, and basically a barometer of their football team. You want to find out where you stand with the big boys. A home game against Alabama, that's going to let you know where you're at, where you're going, and what you need to work on to be in that conversation with Alabama.
All right, back to the big board. Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. You know what happened yesterday? Something that doesn't happen very often.
What's that?
Tennessee got a win.
They did. Yeah, Garantano, 102 yards passing on 13 attempts. So they were up and down the field yesterday.
The thing about this game is Will McBride. Garantano gets hurt. Will McBride comes in. Debut for the freshman. They have to burn his red shirt. He didn't look like he was ready to play. He's 1 of 8 in this game. But now you have a quarterback that has lost his redshirt season, and it almost makes me wonder, what could Butch Jones have done differently? He's trying to win now. He's got to save his job now. He can't worry about a quarterback, a freshman, burning a red shirt.
You know what? That's a shame. That really is. If you're that kid's family, and you were sold a bill of goods to come play football from there. And sure, he's happy to do it. He understands the situation. But at the end of the day, you're taking away a year of eligibility for this kid. I mean, there's no hardship that could be applied for here. I think, barring an injury, which was not the case here, I think it's another indictment on Butch Jones and his inability to handle people and personnel. I mean, I really have. I mean, just time and time again, he just handles things the absolute wrong way. And if I'm a kid, by the way, friend of the family, kid, has a son. His father played at Tennessee. His grandfather played at Tennessee. He has been committed to Tennessee, offensive lineman, for the last year and a half, decommitted from Tennessee, and is now opening up. Think about this. His dad and grandfather played at Tennessee, and now all of a sudden he's looking elsewhere to go play football. That's all you need to know about the state of the union for Tennessee right now. And then you got the coach ripping red shirts off guys. If I have a son, the last thing in the world he's doing is going to play football in Knoxville.
For Butch Jones.
For Butch Jones.
Current environment.
Right. I mean, seriously, that's a shame.
Well, you want to look at a bright side. Tennessee does snap a 4-game losing streak, however, still winless in the conference, 0-5. But 3 conference games to finish up at Mizzou, LSU, and then Vandy. That game next week against Mizzou that's going to be an interesting football game because Missouri's got a whole lot to play for. Are these Volunteers? Are they fired up to play for Butch Jones? Because they're not winning all 3 of these games. They're not going to a bowl.
They're going to get embarrassed next week by Missouri, I feel. Here's what I want. I want Tennessee and Vanderbilt 0-7 in the SEC. Final game of the season. Who's it going to be? Who's going to go 0-8 in the SEC? Not to mention the SEC East, which is it's pretty bad this year, folks. I mean, it really is. Let's not kid ourselves. But imagine if that's where the state of Tennessee football is. Well, you're playing Vanderbilt in the last game of the season to make sure you don't go winless in conference. You're ripping red shirts off kids. I mean, it is a dumpster fire in Knoxville and Gainesville right now.
All right, let's go back to the big board. Texas Pete Scoreboard, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Tennessee gets a win, and looky here, Vanderbilt gets a win. Snap that 5-game losing streak, still in line for a bowl game if they can win 2 of their final 3. Got to feel good for Derek Mason's team. Never trailed in this game. Here's something interesting stat. Vanderbilt led 14-7 in the second quarter. It's the first time Vanderbilt has had a lead beyond the first quarter since September when they beat Kansas State. Vanderbilt has been playing from behind for 2 months.
Yeah, think about that Kansas State game. After they won that, there was a lot of momentum. You felt like, maybe they were going to compete. And then the dreaded comments about Alabama. Bring on Alabama. Well, be careful what you wish for. 5 losses in a row regular. But look, Coach Mason, you can tell. I mean, he seems like he's the right guy for the job for me. I mean, that's a tough job to coach football at Vanderbilt and win. James Franklin's the only guy I know that's ever been able to do it. Turns out he's pretty good, just not yesterday. But full credit to him. They got a couple games left. They got a Kentucky team coming in whose defense is really struggling. A chance to maybe sneak a win next week, get back to 5-5, and then who knows, win against Tennessee. Possibly be bowl eligible, so a lot to play for.
Give it up for that Vandy D. They hold Western Kentucky to -6 yards rushing. And how about Ralph Webb? We saw him a bit earlier. He ran for 104 yards in this game. Did you know, and this totally caught me by surprise.
Just by the tone in your voice.
He is 11th in SEC career rushing yards, 3,800 yards. Moved into 11th place yesterday. I can't recall who he passed, but I did not know that. That is a revelation.
Nick Chubb, by the way, yesterday, moving into top 4. He's a guy missed a whole year, but he missed a whole year of his career, so that's a little bit surprising.
Nick Chubb is pretty good. I don't know if you noticed that.
He's not bad, and I noticed since the injuries, you watch him when he's tackled, he knows how to fall, man. It's like he went to school to learn how to protect those knees. I mean, as soon as he gets contact, boom, he's down. Running backs can learn from that.
All right, one more game to tell you about as we go back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Arkansas has to come from behind to knock off a tough Coastal Carolina team that's now won it. What is it with the SEC struggling with these lower class teams, these lower division teams that are just awful this year? Yeah. Coastal Carolina, 1 win all season, has Arkansas down 13 points in the fourth quarter, and the Hogs are able to get it done thanks to a nice 88-yard run by T.J. Hammonds and then Cole Kelly with a late touchdown run. But Hogs do pick up a victory that they absolutely have to have for Brett Bielema and company.
If the eye test, you talk about the eye test of SEC teams this year, I don't know that there's a team worse than, and I'm honestly, Arkansas. They're so bad. Defensively, to give up 38 points to Coastal Carolina, one of the worst teams in all of college football, and to eke out a 1-point victory. I mean, I don't know what's going on at Fayetteville right now. I mean, it is an absolute mess.
At LSU, home to Mississippi State, home to Missouri.
Loss.
4-8.
You win 2 games by 2 points against Coastal Carolina. Ole Miss, 2 games you probably should have lost. You're looking at a 2-10 season. 2-10 is what maybe they should be. It's an embarrassment. He's not going to be the head coach there next year. Right. I have no idea what they're going to do to fix this, but they got a long way to go. You look at Florida, you look at Tennessee, some of these other programs, even Ole Miss, Missouri to an extent. If they want to make a change, if they get the right guy in there, they can turn around pretty quickly. Arkansas is a lost cause, man. It's going to take 4 or 5 years to turn that thing around.
Brett Bielema's gone. Butch Jones is gone. Jim McElwain is already gone. We're going to have a big turnover although Barry Odom may have saved his job. Hey, I do want to get a couple of comments from Larry Grigsby. Put a stake in Tennessee, and this made me laugh. James Crump, Butch will turn it around next year, brick by brick.
Who's this?
Butch.
Yeah, where's he going to turn it around? I don't even know. I don't even know if he would be an analyst or anything. I mean, he literally might just need to take some time for himself and do some soul searching.
Yeah, I guess a good question is, does anyone next year, Butch Jones gets fired, does anyone look at him as a head coach next year?
No.
A smaller school or non-power 5 school? Ditto Jim McElwain. Is anyone looking at him?
No. Not at least for a couple years.
Which guy do you hire first?
Man, I look at my staff and I start analyzing my coordinators and my linebackers coach before I hire either one of those guys. No, I'm being serious. I don't see the leadership qualities, especially with Butch Jones. I mean, you got these guys, these kids looking around. The coaches are looking at each other. Yesterday with Randy Shannon, Florida kids pointing the fingers. They don't even show up for a road game. I mean, it's really gotten out of hand for both of those programs quickly.
Nakia Hester says, James, LOL. Nakia, we're right there. We're laughing. Okay. I want to take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete SEC East standings.
Yeah.
It's a done deal. Georgia clinches. First time since 2012 back in the title game. First time 9-0 since Herschel. South Carolina still putting together a solid season. Kentucky, tough loss yesterday. But, man, it's Georgia. You got 4 teams, 3 teams in the middle, and then the also-rans. Really weird season in the East.
Yeah, you think about Jacob Eason.
Love that, Jake.
You think about Jacob Eason.
Jacob who?
Jacob Eason, right.
I don't
The
remember.
quarterback for Georgia coming into this season, the five-star guy. I think there's so much to be said and so much you can see into the Georgia football program with how this thing played out. Jake Fromm knew that Jacob Eason was coming in there, that he was going to be the quarterback. Fromm still wanted to go to Georgia. He still wanted to compete for a job. He ended up getting the job because of an injury, but he's the starting quarterback at Georgia. They end up getting Justin Fields, a number 2 quarterback in all of the country, to come to Georgia for that same reason. Where Kirby's obviously telling this kid, look, if you come in and you're the best player, you're going to play. Look at what Jake Fromm, look at where Jake Fromm is. And all this does, Bob, is it breeds competition. And these guys don't shy away from it. And those are the kind of young men you want on your football team.
Is Jacob Eason back with Georgia next year?
There's no way. He can't be.
Can't be.
He can't be. You know, for himself, for a guy who, you know, his expectation is to play in Sundays, all the physical attributes that he's got to get on a football field. And it's not going to happen in Athens. Now, the question is, does he go the junior college route, kind of like Mettenberger did, Cam Newton did, and play there for a year? Or does he sit out a year, go to a Power 5 school? A lot of people suggesting Florida. A lot of people say Miami because of the ties there. Obviously, being from the Pacific Northwest, you got Washington State, a whole bunch of different possibilities. He needs to go to a place where they're going to run a pro-style offense and just air it out. Look at what Will Greer's doing at West Virginia.
He's from the state of Washington.
Right.
He will end up at Washington State. All right.
You think? Oh, that was it right there.
Mike Leach, he's
Bob
going to throw
Pasella,
for 1 million
ladies and
yards.
gentlemen.
He's going to throw for 1 million yards. He's going to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL. All right, back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. SEC West standings. Alabama still hasn't clinched yet. They're moving that much closer. The Auburn-Georgia game will tell us everything we need to know. Mississippi State has Alabama at home next week, so you know, LSU, at the end of the day, even in defeat, LSU to me had one of the best weeks possible in defeat. Tigers just continue to impress with the way that they are playing and the fact that they haven't given up. And, you know, every single team in the West, though, all of them won't get there. Every single team in the West still has a shot to make a bowl.
Yeah, and, you know, don't forget about Ole Miss coming on at the right time.
Matt Luke goes 6-6. Obviously can't go to a bowl, but does they give him another shot next year? Or do they look outside first and say, let's see who we can potentially hire, and then they come back to Matt Luke?
Yeah, I think so. I think they take a look at that. I think the job that he's done keeping these players focused. I mean, they compete week after week after week. And it looked early on in the season that they were just going to lay down. You know, you ask yourself, what are these kids playing for? It was a slippery slope that they appeared to be sliding down. And this Tamu kid, ever since he's come in for Patterson and got hurt right before halftime a couple weeks ago, he's kind of taking on more of a leadership role. You know what I'm saying? It seems like these kids are playing a little bit harder with him, and you know, Ole Miss is going to be a tough out for some guys down the stretch.
I'm going to talk about Jordan Tamu in just a minute. I want to get a comment from James Crump. Eye test: Georgia and Alabama are the only two teams who look like they can win the national championship. The SEC championship game will be the de facto national championship game, and I have a feeling that there are a lot of folks in SEC country that feel that very same way. These are far and away the best two teams in college football. Agree?
Yeah, I do think so. We're going to find out a lot more about Georgia on Saturday against Auburn. 9-0, they've won every game they're supposed to. They've continued to get better. That game in Auburn next week is going to make a huge impact on the national landscape as far as the playoff. The SEC champion is a one-loss Georgia team, assuming if they do lose to Alabama in the national championship and they're not a conference champion, would they jump a one-loss conference champion, say in Oklahoma, or a one-loss Notre Dame? You would say no. Maybe a one-loss Washington gets back into it. It's just going to be really tough for Georgia to get back into it if they lose against Auburn this week, because you don't want to be in that thing. It basically comes down to, even if you lose to Auburn, you got to beat Alabama. As Ric Flair said, in order to be the man, you got to beat the man. And that's where Georgia is.
Thank you,
right
Nature
now.
Boy. All right, let's go ahead and hand out some game balls.
Yeah,
okay?
that's my favorite part of the show.
Defensive game ball, SEC.
Well, let's see. I got a couple here.
Yes,
no, I do. I got Rodney Harrison yesterday for Alabama, the interception. That was the turning point. They go up 14-0.
It was a turning point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was the turning point of the game.
They're already up 7-0.
And it made it 14-0. turned out to be the biggest play of the game without question.
Well, they were already headed in that direction. It just furthered the direction. It didn't turn. They just
7
furthered
more tackles.
the direction.
He was outstanding. He had to step up there with the injuries at linebacker for Alabama. I thought he was outstanding. And offensively, I'm going with Jarrett Stidham.
Well, we're not going to that yet.
No, we are. I'm going to tell you my Jarrett
Stidham.
Stidham. I want to get it out of the way.
Our producer, Mark, see, this is what we deal with, Mark. He doesn't follow the rundown. He doesn't read the rundown. We're trying to go in an orderly fashion here. You know, I don't know what you guys do in radio. You just talk for 4 hours, but that's not the way we work here. All right, I'm going to give out a defensive game ball. How about this? Never thought I'd do this.
Don't you dare ask me for my offensive game ball.
Tennessee defense gets my defensive game ball.
Well, you're really stretching,
Here's why. Hey, they played a solid Southern Miss team. You know, this is a team that has a winning record, not like Coastal Carolina that's 1-8.
Right.
They give up just 3 points in the first 54 minutes. They give up just 279 yards total. They force a couple of turnovers. Kyle Phillips has a couple of sacks. Colton Jumper, 2.5 tackles for loss. I think these kids show that they are still engaged. We saw Florida yesterday. This team was not engaged offensively or defensively. It's tough at this point in time at Tennessee. You hadn't won an SEC game. They showed that they were engaged. I'm giving them my game ball whether you like it or not.
Well, you know what I'm going to do? Next week, I'm already going to do it. Mark, write this down. Next week, I'm giving my defensive game ball to the Tennessee defense after they give up 700 yards to Missouri.
And they may very well do that, but we're talking about this
week. No, I think that's a great pick.
All right, you have an offensive game ball.
I do. You're not going to believe who it is, guys. It's Jarrett Stidham. He goes 20 of 27, 3 touchdowns, another 30 yards on the ground. And this is a guy who was sacked in SEC leading 21 times in this season. Texas A&M led the nation with 30 sacks coming into the game. He only goes down 1 time for a loss yesterday, extended some plays with his feet. This kid's good, man. You watch Auburn play, this guy's good, without question, the best quarterback that Georgia's faced all season long, and I can't wait to see Saturday, man. I want to see what he does against that Georgia defense, and I want to see how Georgia's defense responds to this kid because he's the real deal, man.
I love his numbers. His numbers are sensational. I do like that. I'm giving up my offensive game ball to Jordan Ta'amu because he throws for 382 yards. He's 31 of 40, 4 touchdowns, 382. The last 2 games as the starter replacing Shea Patterson, 750 yards through the air. And they've scored 74 points in those 2 games. Last week, he ran for 76 yards. This week, he didn't have to run. But I'm telling you what, a backup quarterback to come in and step up and play the way he has, it's akin to the way that Jake Fromm has played for Georgia. He's come out of nowhere. And, he's kept this team alive for a 500 season, which didn't seem likely a few weeks ago.
How many schools in the country could you put in the backup quarterback and not skip a beat? You know, they may have gotten a little bit better. You know, I mean, they have not skipped a beat. This Ole Miss offense rolling. 444 total yards of offense for him last week. He keeps it moving again yesterday. Gets the big win on the last-second touchdown play. It's going to be a tough decision. Shea Patterson, does he consider transferring? I don't know. That's going to be a big question for him moving forward.
Who's the coach? Who's the coach next year? What does the coach want to do?
Right.
I don't know. I love the comments. The comments are rolling in. Mark, we got time for a few comments, don't we? Love this. I mean, people wanted James Crump. James, you're the man this morning. Tennessee is back. He did give me the LOL.
This guy just wrote in. He says Auburn could upset Georgia next week. Guys, newsflash for you. Auburn's going to be favored in the football game.
Are they?
Yes. There's no question about it.
I'm taking Georgia. You're going to give me Georgia in points?
Yeah. I promise you when the line comes out, Auburn will be favored in this game. It might be 1 or 2 points. It might be a pick 'em by kickoff. I don't know. But when the line comes out, Auburn is going to be favored.
All right, you talk about Stidham, and he's the best quarterback that this Georgia defense has faced all year. I love this Georgia secondary going up against Stidham. I think he is going to have to be pinpoint perfect. And with Georgia's defensive line applying the pressure that they have applied all year long, Stidham's not going to be able to sit back there and just take his time looking for receivers. Remember what happened against Clemson earlier in the year? I know we're a long way from that, but I just don't see him having the time to be as pinpoint accurate as he's been against some of these other teams this year in which he's completed 80% of its passes.
Where's Georgia's pass rush? They had no pass rush yesterday. But hey, maybe they didn't. I mean, it did seem like there was a little vanilla game plan yesterday.
Lorenzo Carter's going to break loose. He's going to have a big game.
Well, if you're Auburn, here's my question. They run the football with some of the best teams in the country, no doubt about it. They throw a deep ball yesterday. Stidham makes the big play before halftime. There's nothing intermediate. There's nothing in between. It's either these 60, 75-yard deep passes or they run the ball incrementally down the field, move the chains. There's nothing really in the middle there. So that's something they're going to have to find a way to do against Georgia, I think, because I don't know that they're going to be able to consistently run the ball, eat the clock, and Georgia sure isn't going to let them beat them off the top because those things were worked out after Missouri, right?
Yes.
Right.
Well, Steve Devon says Auburn will lose by 2 touchdowns. Rio Handley, UGA struggled with an unranked SC team yesterday. I don't know if they struggled. They won by the same score Alabama won by.
You're not going to blow out South Carolina, okay? Watch South Carolina play. Nobody's going to blow them out. They load up the box. They don't allow you to make big plays. They don't turn the ball over. 24-10 is about as good as you can do against a South Carolina team, especially when you had that turnover at the 5-yard line. So, I mean, it is what it is. You can't judge it on that.
J.C. Howell says Auburn loses to UGA next Saturday. Bank on it. And I might just bank on it. I'm not a betting man, but I might bank on it because Hans is going the other way. Blake Richardson says, yes, Auburn can upset Georgia. We know that. George B. Griffin struggled. Come on, LOL. Georgia did not struggle in that game. They did.
Were you talking about against South Carolina?
Yeah,
no,
they didn't struggle in that game.
Not at all.
Ben Sykes says if Auburn is favored, Vegas is going to lose a lot of money.
They very well might. Don't forget a couple weeks ago, Mississippi State was favored in Texas A&M. A&M coming off the big win at Florida. Everybody said, well, wait a second. How in the world are they favored in this football game? They beat the snot out of Texas A&M in College Station. So these handicappers, they got a pretty idea what they're doing. Both teams came out of the games, Auburn and Georgia, respectively, healthy after yesterday. So the line's going to be on this pretty soon. The early line prior to yesterday's game was Auburn -1.5. Now, the big question about everything moving forward, with Alabama, they lose 2 starting linebackers. Looks like for the year yesterday, knee and a foot. How do they make adjustments to that? I mean, that's a big part. Obviously, their run defense wasn't what it was used to yesterday. Gave up 155 yards to LSU. That is something that they're going to have to find out a way in a short time to get ironed out before Mississippi State next Saturday night.
I don't know if Nick Saban's capable of doing that.
Oof.
I think he is. That's facetious.
I know, Bob. I'm starting to pick up on your...
All right, so you like Auburn against Georgia next week. You like Auburn to win the game.
I do. I think Auburn wins the game in a close one. I think it's going to be, somebody makes a mistake, a tip ball. I mean, it's going to be a very close, crazy football game. But here's the thing. It's not the end of the world if you're Georgia. You beat Kentucky, you beat Georgia Tech. It's the same thing that happened before. You got to beat Alabama. If you want to be in the playoff, you've got to beat Alabama one way or the other. Win or loss to Auburn, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. What it does do is it keeps Auburn's hopes alive for an SEC West and an SEC championship appearance with Alabama on deck. But I just think this game on the road, I know Georgia has a history of winning there. I've looked at this schedule all season long. I said that's going to be the spot where Georgia gets it. I just got a tough feeling.
Georgia wins next Saturday. And it does matter because Georgia can win out, get to the SEC championship game, lose close, and if they're number 1, they're going to stay in the top 4. And it all matters if you got to beat Auburn to keep that scenario into effect, and that's why I think they're motivated and they're going to win that game. We're out of time.
Well, the good thing that Georgia has is that Gus Malzahn's coaching the game, so there's always a chance.
All right, we got to run. He's Hans Heiser. I'm Bob Pasella, Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. We will see you next Sunday morning after a very good Auburn-Georgia game. See you then. Take care.